When we talk about arrogance, many people immediately imagine a person who walks with their chin held high, refusing to greet others or treating people with disrespect. But arrogance is far more subtle, far more internal, and far more dangerous than we admit. Arrogance is not just how you walk, it's how your heart behaves. It is the inner whisper that tells you that you don't need guidance, you don't need help, you don't need to change. It convinces you that you're already right, already complete, already above accountability. Arrogance is the quiet voice that says, I know enough. Even when you haven't taken a single step toward improvement, and the tragedy is that the more arrogance grows inside, the further you drift from Allah without even realizing it. The heart that carries arrogance becomes heavier, harder, and more blinded. It loses its sensitivity to advice, to humility, to reflection. It loses the ability to recognize its own mistakes, and the most dangerous part is that arrogance never arrives loudly, it creeps in silently. It appears when you think you're doing well and suddenly you start assuming that your achievements are your own brilliance. It appears when you compare yourself to others and suddenly believe that you're better. It appears when you worship, and instead of feeling grateful, you feel superior. This is why arrogance is so destructive. It shifts your focus from Allah to yourself. Arrogance blocks you from seeing truth even when it stands right in front of you. It blocks you from accepting your flaws even when they are harming you. It blocks you from growing even when growth is what you desperately need. And this blockage does not happen because Allah has turned away from you, but because arrogance has sealed the doors of your heart from within. The distance is not created by him, it's created by the ego that refuses to bow. But something remarkable happens when you replace arrogance with humility. As soon as humility enters the heart, clarity returns. Humility is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of wisdom. Only the wise understand how fragile they truly are. Only the wise recognize that they are dependent on Allah for every breath, every opportunity, every heartbeat. Humility is the light that illuminates what arrogance tried so desperately to hide. It allows you to see yourself honestly, without excuses and without illusions. And this honest self-awareness is the first step toward transformation. When you prostrate, it becomes impossible to maintain the illusion of superiority. Your forehead touches the ground, and in that moment you acknowledge the truth that arrogance tries to suppress. You are a creation, not the creator. You are dependent, not independent. You are needy, not self-sufficient. And that realization is not humiliating, it is liberating. Because when you finally admit the truth of your weakness, you finally unlock the strength of Allah's mercy. Prostration is not just an action of the body, it is a surrender of the heart. It is declaring, I let go of the delusion that I am in control. I let go of the pride that blinds me. I let go of the ego that pretends it does not need guidance. Every time your head lowers, your soul rises. Every time your ego breaks, your connection strengthens. In sajda, you are not falling, you are being lifted. You are being realigned with the purpose that arrogance kept hidden from you. Arrogance tells you that dependence is weakness. Sajda teaches you that dependence on Allah is the greatest strength. Arrogance wants you to stand tall even when your soul is collapsing inside. Sajda teaches you that bowing down brings the stability your heart has been craving. Arrogance makes you defend your flaws. Sajda teaches you to admit them so Allah can heal them. Arrogance hardens you. Sajda softens you. And the beauty of humility is that it opens the doors that arrogance slammed shut. When you humble yourself before Allah, you suddenly recognize guidance in places you once ignored. You hear reminders that you once dismissed. You start seeing your blessings with a deeper appreciation. You become more compassionate, more patient, more grateful. Because humility doesn't just change how you stand in prayer, it changes how you stand in life. Look at the difference between a person who carries arrogance and a person who carries humility. The arrogant person is constantly defending, constantly competing, constantly proving. Their life becomes exhausting because they are always trying to live up to an image they created for themselves. But humility frees you from all of that. When you don't need to appear perfect, you can finally work on actually improving. When you don't need to pretend you know everything, you can finally begin learning. When you don't need to act superior, you can finally connect with people honestly and sincerely. Humility makes your life lighter, and this is why Allah is not found in arrogance, He is found in prostration. Because arrogance keeps you standing in front of the world, but prostration brings you to the one who created the world. Arrogance makes you feel large, but sajda reminds you that you are small and yet deeply cherished by Allah. Arrogance makes you rely on your limited strength, but sajda connects you to the limitless strength of your Lord. When your forehead touches the ground, you enter a spiritual position that no form of pride can survive. It disintegrates, it collapses, it dissolves into nothingness, and when it does, something new emerges inside you: clarity, sincerity, tranquility. You begin to see your own flaws as opportunities for growth instead of reasons to deny. You begin to see trials as lessons instead of punishments. You begin to see people with compassion instead of comparison. This shift in perspective is not small, it changes everything. So many people today feel lost, not because they lack guidance, but because their arrogance refuses to let them accept it. So many people feel frustrated not because their path is blocked, but because their ego won't allow them to adjust. So many people feel spiritually empty, not because Allah is distant, but because their pride has built a wall between their heart and their Creator. And that wall can only be torn down through humility. When a person finally bows with sincerity, they experience something profound. The heart becomes soft again. Tears come easily. Regret turns into motivation, fear turns into hope, confusion turns into clarity. Sajda reconnects you with the part of yourself that arrogance buried, the part that longs for Allah, the part that wants to grow, the part that wants to return to purity. And in that moment of connection, you realize something life-changing. Allah was never far. It was your ego that walked away. The truth is simple. You cannot find Allah through self-glorification. You cannot find Him through pride. You cannot find Him through a heart that refuses to bend. You find Him when your heart surrenders. You find Him when your ego finally becomes silent. You find Him when humility opens the door that arrogance had locked for too long. And the place where this surrender becomes real, tangible, and transformative is in sajda. When arrogance leaves, guidance enters. When pride melts, mercy flows. And when the heart finally bends, Allah raises it higher than it ever stood. There is a quiet truth about the human heart that many people overlook. Every time arrogance takes root inside you, something precious breaks. It might be your peace, your clarity, your self-awareness, or your connection with Allah, but something always breaks. Arrogance has a way of damaging your relationship with others, and more importantly, damaging your relationship with your own soul. It convinces you that you don't need to change, that your mistakes are minor, that your flaws are justified, that your choices are fine simply because you made them. Arrogance feeds your inner illusions until the truth becomes uncomfortable and accountability becomes unbearable. And in that state, you slowly drift further from the mercy that was always available to you. But there is something extraordinary about prostration. What arrogance breaks, prostration rebuilds. What ego destroys, sajda repairs. You could be carrying years of pride, months of stubbornness, or a lifetime of excuses, but one sincere prostration can soften everything that became hardened. The same heart that was once too proud to bow suddenly feels safe when it finally bows down. This is the miracle of humility. It heals what pride wounded. People often underestimate the spiritual power of sajda. They see it as a gesture, a ritual, a movement. But in reality, it is the most profound therapy your heart will ever experience. Sajda realigns your soul the way a compass realigns itself to true north when it's freed from interference. Life interferes with you constantly: stress, expectations, disappointments, desires, distractions, and arrogance amplifies all of it, twisting your direction. But when you fall into prostration with sincerity, the interference drops, the distortion clears, the confusion dissolves, and the heart finally points back to where it belongs. Arrogance creates distance between you and Allah, but prostration eliminates that distance instantly. Think about it. In sajda, you are physically at your lowest point, yet spiritually you are at your highest. You are closest to Allah not when you stand tall, not when you speak confidently, not when you feel strong, but when your forehead touches the ground and your heart whispers its truth. Sajda rebuilds the connection that arrogance damaged. It reminds you that you don't need to be perfect for Allah to accept you. You only need to be sincere. And sincerity emerges beautifully when you break your ego. You cannot fake sincerity in sajda. You cannot pretend to be humble while your head is on the ground. The body doesn't lie in that position. Even if someone tries to maintain arrogance, prostration exposes their truth. It forces an internal conversation. Because as you lower your head, your own soul asks you, why were you holding on to pride? What were you gaining by resisting change? What were you protecting except your own illusions? And in that moment, clarity enters the heart effortlessly. There is a reason many people cry in sujood without planning to. It's because the soul finally speaks. It's because the weight of arrogance finally lifts. It's because silence becomes louder than pride. When you prostrate, your heart finds the courage it didn't have when you were standing. It finds the softness it lost. It finds the honesty it buried. Sajda isn't just a physical posture, it's a moment of complete internal truthfulness. And truth is the first step to healing. Arrogance pushes people into defending their flaws, but sajda encourages them to release them. Arrogance makes people justify their mistakes, but sajda inspires them to correct them. Arrogance makes the heart stubborn, but sajda makes it flexible. Arrogance convinces you that you are enough on your own, but sajda reminds you that you are never alone. It breaks the illusion of self-sufficiency and reveals the beauty of total dependence on Allah, and this dependence is not humiliation, it is empowerment. You regain strength when you stop pretending you can handle everything alone. You regain clarity when you stop insisting that your way is always right. You regain peace when you stop competing with life and start surrendering to the one who designed your life. Prostration helps you rebuild everything arrogance tore apart. It teaches you not to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, but to place that weight before Allah, who never gets tired of listening. People often confuse arrogance with confidence. They think that if they let go of their pride, they will appear weak. But arrogance is not strength, it is insecurity disguised as strength. The stronger you are internally, the less you need arrogance externally. True confidence is built on humility, not on ego, and nothing cultivates humility like sincere prostration. You rise from sajda calmer, wiser, softer, and more grounded, not because the world changed, but because your perception of the world changed. Sajda also rebuilds your ability to feel gratitude. Arrogance blinds you to your blessings because it teaches you to take credit for everything. It makes you think, I earned this, I deserve this, I achieved this. And when you believe that everything is your doing, you naturally become less thankful. But when you prostrate, you remember how small you are and how generous Allah has been to you despite your flaws, despite your mistakes, and despite your moments of forgetfulness. Gratitude blooms effortlessly when you bow, because your heart remembers the truth it forgets when it's standing. And gratitude transforms everything. A grateful person becomes more patient, more hopeful, more peaceful. Their heart gains resilience, their mind gains clarity, their soul gains direction. Gratitude is the fruit of humility, and humility is the fruit of sajda. This is how prostration rebuilds your emotional and spiritual health from the inside out. Prostration also rebuilds relationships. Arrogance destroys bonds because it makes you believe that apologizing is beneath you, forgiving is optional, and compromising is a sign of weakness. But sajda softens the heart so deeply that it becomes capable of forgiving others because it recognizes how desperately it needs forgiveness itself. When you bow before Allah sincerely, you leave the sajda with less anger, less pride, and less resentment. The same heart that refused to forgive suddenly feels light. The same ego that resisted apologies suddenly steps aside. Sajda teaches you humility with Allah, and humility with Allah teaches you humility with people. But perhaps the most beautiful rebuilding happens inside yourself. Arrogance damages your self-awareness. It prevents you from seeing your flaws clearly, from admitting your weaknesses, from acknowledging your mistakes. And without self-awareness, growth becomes impossible, but in prostration you confront yourself with honesty. You recognize your limitations, your wounds, your patterns, your habits. You meet your true self without filters. And once you see yourself clearly in that quiet moment with Allah, transformation begins naturally. Sajda becomes a mirror that shows you who you truly are and who you can still become. And the incredible thing is that Allah does not expect perfection from you. He does not demand a flawless heart. What He asks for is sincerity, humility, and effort. And nothing embodies sincerity more beautifully than prostration. It is the moment when your heart admits, I cannot fix my life without you. And Allah responds to that humility with guidance, openings, blessings, and peace that arrogance could never bring. What arrogance breaks, prostration repairs. There is a sentence many people repeat without realizing how deeply it damages their potential. I'm tired. They say it when they face difficulty, when they face delay, when they face discomfort, or when they face a challenge that demands more effort than they are willing to give. But the truth is that most of the time, people are not tired, they are undisciplined. The body gets tired after physical exertion, but the soul gets tired when it is constantly negotiating with laziness, excuses, and procrastination. And what we call tiredness is often nothing more than the exhaustion that comes from battling our own lack of discipline. When a person is disciplined, challenges don't exhaust them, they sharpen them. But when a person is undisciplined, even simple responsibilities feel overwhelming. Waking up on time feels heavy, finishing tasks feels draining, staying consistent feels impossible. And soon, the person convinces themselves that their problem is fatigue, burnout, or weakness. But if they could look honestly into their own habits, they would discover something far more empowering. The problem is not that they cannot do it, but that they do not consistently choose to do it. Undisciplined people live in a constant state of internal conflict. They know what they should do, but they don't do it. They know what will benefit them, but they avoid it. They know their goals require consistency, but they choose comfort. And this internal friction drains far more energy than the actual act of working, praying, studying, or improving. A disciplined person simply starts. An undisciplined person spends hours thinking about starting, arguing with themselves about starting, and finding reasons to delay starting. And by the time they finally begin or give up, they feel tired, but it is not the work that tired them, it is the avoidance. This is why discipline is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. Discipline frees you from the mental noise that drains the soul. It replaces the endless cycle of hesitation with clarity. It replaces the fear of failure with action. It replaces excuses with results, and this transformation doesn't require a miracle, it requires habits. Small, consistent, quiet habits, the kind of habits that undisciplined people overlook because they are searching for motivation rather than structure. Motivation is emotional, it comes and goes, but discipline is spiritual, it is rooted in your values, your purpose, and your relationship with Allah. When you are disciplined, you don't wait to feel like it. You don't wait for the perfect day, the perfect mood, or the perfect situation. You stand up and do what is necessary because you know that consistency is a form of worship. Discipline is not a punishment, it is a pathway to tranquility. The more disciplined you become, the less chaotic your mind feels. What many people misunderstand is that discipline is not about pushing yourself harshly. It is about training your heart to obey your purpose rather than your impulses. Your impulses always choose the easiest option, the quickest comfort, the shortest route. They seek pleasure today even at the cost of regret tomorrow. But discipline chooses the action that aligns with who you want to become, not who you temporarily feel like being. There is a powerful connection between discipline and spirituality. When a person is undisciplined in their daily life, they naturally struggle in their worship. The same hesitation that delays responsibilities also delays salah. The same excuses that justify laziness in work also justify laziness in the remembrance of Allah. The same lack of structure that affects goals also affects the heart's connection with the Creator. But when discipline enters the heart, life changes. Prayer becomes timely, not rushed. Qur'an becomes a habit, not an afterthought. Reflection becomes part of the day, not a rare moment. Discipline strengthens worship, and worship strengthens discipline. Many people say, "I'm too tired to pray," or "I'm too stressed to focus," or "I'm too busy to improve." But a person who is disciplined does not wait until their schedule becomes empty or their mood becomes perfect. They understand that discipline is not built on emotions. It is built on commitments. Even if they are sleepy, they get up. Even if they are stressed, they reset. Even if they are overwhelmed, they prioritize. And soon, something incredible happens. Their life becomes peaceful. The chaos decreases, the heart becomes lighter, the mind becomes sharper, because discipline fixes what disorganization ruins. And this extends to every part of life. A disciplined person eats healthier because they don't let cravings control them. They speak better because they don't let anger lead their words. They manage time wisely because they understand the value of every hour. They use their money responsibly because they don't let impulses dictate their spending. They build healthy relationships because discipline teaches patience, listening, and self-control. Discipline is not just about routines, it is about character. Undisciplined people do not lack ambition, they lack structure. They have dreams, but not systems. They have desires, but not habits. They want results, but avoid the process. They start with excitement and end with excuses. They pray for change while repeating the same behaviors that prevent change. And then they wonder why their life feels stagnant. But when you embrace discipline, you stop relying on feelings and start relying on principles. A disciplined heart does not complain as much because it is busy improving. It does not compare itself to others because it is focused on its own progress. It does not fear challenges because it knows consistency will overcome them. It does not collapse under pressure because it has trained itself to stand firm. Discipline gives you emotional resilience, spiritual focus, and mental strength. It becomes the backbone of your growth. And here is something important. Discipline is not built overnight. It is built in the small decisions you make every day. Waking up a little earlier, reducing distractions, keeping your promises to yourself, choosing Qur'an over endless scrolling, completing tasks instead of delaying them, showing up even when you don't feel like it. Every small act of discipline makes the next one easier. The human body is capable of much more than we think. It is the mind that gets overwhelmed, not the muscles. It is the heart that gets discouraged, not the limbs, and the soul only becomes tired when it is disconnected from purpose. When purpose becomes clear, discipline becomes natural. When you know why you are doing something, the how becomes easier. So the next time you tell yourself, "I'm tired," pause and reflect. Are you tired because you pushed yourself in the right direction? Or are you tired because you spent the entire day fighting your own lack of structure? Are you tired because you worked hard? Or because you avoided working at all? Are you tired because life genuinely overwhelmed you? Or because your own inconsistency created chaos? Most people are not tired, they are undisciplined. And the moment they embrace discipline, they discover that they have far more strength, clarity, energy, and potential than they ever believed possible. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you can become. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that the greatest battle they fight is not with the world around them, but with the ego inside them. The ego is subtle. It doesn't scream or shout. It whispers. It negotiates. It convinces you that comfort is better than growth, that excuses are better than accountability, that delaying is better than doing. It tells you that you have time, that you'll start tomorrow, that you don't need to push yourself today. And without realizing it, people become prisoners to this inner voice. They think they are tired, but in reality, they are controlled by an ego that always chooses ease over effort. Discipline does not come naturally to a person ruled by their ego. The ego loves shortcuts, but discipline demands consistency. The ego loves instant gratification, but discipline requires patience. The ego loves being in control, but discipline requires surrendering to a greater purpose. This is why discipline always begins where ego ends. As long as the ego sits in the driving seat, discipline cannot exist. The ego will always find a reason to stop you from waking up early, from praying on time, from pushing yourself, from improving your habits, from moving toward your goals. But something transforms inside a person the moment they silence the ego. When the ego stops negotiating, the heart starts leading. When the ego stops resisting, the soul starts rising. When the ego stops speaking, discipline begins to breathe. And this shift happens not through force, but through humility. When you humble yourself, truly humble yourself, you create room inside your heart for discipline to grow. Humility is not weakness. It is the recognition that your nafs is not your master. It is the realization that feeling tired is not always fatigue. Sometimes it's avoidance. That feeling overwhelmed is not always pressure. Sometimes it's a lack of structure. That feeling stuck is not always failure. Sometimes it's your ego refusing to let you change. When you let go of ego, you take responsibility, and responsibility is the seed from which discipline grows. Every disciplined person you admire, whether in worship, character, work, or life, began the moment they stopped pampering their ego. They stopped giving themselves excuses. They stopped waiting for motivation. They stopped letting feelings decide their actions. They understood that if they wanted to build something meaningful, they had to stop negotiating with the part of themselves that wanted comfort more than purpose. Your ego tells you that if something feels uncomfortable, you should avoid it. But your soul tells you that discomfort is a sign of growth. Your ego tells you that prayer is difficult, but your soul knows that prayer is the anchor holding your life together. Your ego tells you it's too early, too cold, too much effort, but your soul whispers that discipline begins with one step, one decision, one moment of sincerity. And when you choose the whisper of the soul over the loud comfort of the ego, you begin a new chapter in your life. The ego is loudest in moments when discipline is needed most. Right when you need to pray, it tells you to wait. Right when you need to work, it tells you to relax. Right when you need to change, it tells you to pause. And every time you obey it, you strengthen it. But every time you ignore it, you weaken it. Every battle you win against your ego builds a layer of discipline inside you. And every layer makes the next battle easier. Discipline is not built in the extraordinary moments, it is built in the everyday choices. When your alarm rings and your ego tells you to sleep, the disciplined heart says, get up. When stress hits and the ego says, escape, discipline says, face it. When failure happens and the ego says, give up, discipline says, try again. Discipline is a conversation between who you are and who you want to become. And the ego is always trying to interrupt that conversation. When you remove ego from the center, you allow purpose to speak louder. This is why the people who are closest to Allah are not the ones who feel the strongest, they are the ones who have trained their ego to be silent. They rise before dawn, not because it's easy, but because they refuse to let their ego win. They pray on time, not because life is calm, but because their heart has learned to prioritize what truly matters. They work hard, not for the world's approval, but because their soul loves excellence. They live with discipline because they have discovered the truth. Ego destroys consistency, but humility builds it. To end ego, you must bow. You must surrender not to the world, but to Allah. Every time you bow your head, your ego bends. Every time your ego bends, your discipline strengthens. Sajda is not just an act of worship, it is an act of training. It trains your soul to lead, it trains your desires to follow, it trains your impulses to soften, It trains your heart to obey something greater than itself. And when this becomes a habit, discipline flows into every part of your life effortlessly. A person who knows how to bow is a person who knows how to rise. And a person whose ego bows is a person whose discipline thrives. The moment you stop arguing with your purpose starts shaping your life. Discipline becomes a natural extension of sincerity. When humility enters your heart, discipline becomes easier than you ever imagined. You stop depending on motivation and start depending on commitment. You stop waiting for the right moment and start creating the right moment. You stop chasing comfort and start chasing growth. And slowly, life begins to change. Your prayers become stronger. Your days become more organized. Your mind becomes clearer. Your goals become achievable. Your worship becomes meaningful. Your self-control becomes powerful. The same person who once said, "I can't do this," suddenly finds themselves doing it consistently. The same person who once felt overwhelmed starts leading a life of purpose. The same person who once felt weak discovers their strength. Because that strength was never absent, it was buried under the ego's noise. Discipline begins where ego ends.